Hello class, today we're going to be talking about our term value, and we are going to be learning about how value is the range of light to dark, and really what we're going to be discussing is how we can start applying these values, not just in creating pencil pressure from heavy to light pencil pressure, but how to start applying them to shapes to create forms on 2D work, as well as working with a couple different mediums so that we can see how to manipulate value within different media. So just starting right up here on the top, it says values, and I just changed it here, are the range of light to dark. We are going to be creating a value scale up here, and then as I mentioned, we are going to be creating what are called value scales, okay, that show the range of light to dark going in these separate sections down here. So let's start up top here, and in order to begin this worksheet, what you will need is you are going to need a pencil kit. It looks just like this. So on the outside of the pencil kit, it'll tell you what should be inside. There should be one pink eraser and one of each pencil below. So there's a 6B, 4B. It'll say either 2B or a B pencil. They are the same value here. Then you'll also have a pencil that is an HB or school pencil. That is also the same values. And then there's 2H and 4H. Now you'll see how this goes from dark to light. When you press really hard with these pencils, it will create a value scale like this that will go from dark to light. Also, if you press really lightly with these pencils, it will also create a lighter version of this scale. So the idea is to start teaching you guys that when you work and you really want to get good at drawing, your pencils can help you manipulate your dark values and your light values so you can really get those nice rich dark tones as well as those lighter tones for when you're working on in like a lighter area, maybe on the highlight of a face or on the highlight of like a bowl if you're doing a still life. So opening this up, let's just check to make sure we have everything. Here's how you know that what the pencil values are. I can use my little cheat sheet here and set it up on top. So I've got my 6B. You'll look right on the bottom of the pencil. There is the number right there. That's what you're looking for. So that's a 6B. And I'm just checking to make sure that's sharp. So I'm going to put that off on this side. Then I'm looking for that 4B. And we've got a 2B next. Okay, and then we have our HB, 2H, and 4H. Another way that I like to teach these students how to remember the order here is I kind of think of like the HB as the 0. And in math class, you might be starting to learn about negative numbers and positive numbers, or positive integers and negative integers. Hey, when you go negative, it goes kind of backwards. So this would be like a 1B, 2B, 3B, 4B, 5B, 6B, right? Going backwards. Okay, whereas from HB going upwards, you can have like an H pencil, a 2H, a 3H, a 4H, 5 and 6, and so on and so on. So we just kind of stick with the even ones here. We kind of skip a couple because really your 2H and your 3H pencils are pretty much the same. And you're going to get to choose which pencils you feel most comfortable with as we work on our drawing skills. So no, you don't have to use every single one of these pencils when we're drawing, for example, in our journal. But for this first step, we are going to just see what we like. Okay? Some of you press really hard with your pencil, so you might like some of these lighter values. Some of you press really lightly, so you might like some of these darker values to help you out. So there they are. There's my pencil. I'm going to put them off to the side. One caution to you, though, is if you need to sharpen a brand new one, please make sure you don't accidentally do this, where you start sharpening on where the label is, because all of a sudden, once we start getting down here, we're not going to know what value pencil this is. So please avoid doing that. I got my pink eraser. So to get us started, I'm actually going to put this value scale, and I'm going to create something kind of fun, and I'm going to mark this up along my letters here. I have the same number of letters as I do on my value scale. So I'm starting with my 6B, and I'm just going to write it really small down here. So I'm going to put my 6B pencil on my V. I'm going to put my 4B pencil on my A. I'm going to put my 2B pencil on my L. My HB on my U. My 2H on my E, and my 4H on my S. Okay, and actually I'm going to move this over just to the middle of the A, so that was my 4B pencil. All right, so there's my value scale. I'm just going to test out these pencils. I want to know what they can do. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm actually going to press hard on the bottom, and I'm going to work my way up and make it lighter. So here we go. I just want to see, now for me, I could awkwardly place my wrist this way and try and go side to side, but what's easier for me is actually to turn my paper, okay, and I'm right-handed, so this is why I'm going from dark to light, and I'm going to press hard. Notice how all my lines are going in the same direction. We don't want to change directions, that creates a messy line, and I'm going to lighten up my pressure as I work my way up. And what I'm trying to do here is manipulate the pencil so I really understand how dark does 6B go and how light does it go. So if I really want to start developing my values, I'm going to overlap and shade in a second time. And again, I'm just easing up on my pressure as I work my way up. I want to know how light I can go, which is pretty light for 6B. And then I'm just going to do a third round. So I'm really darkening down that bottom piece. I'm going to go all the way up, and I want it to be a nice smooth transition. Okay, so that's what my 6B pencil can do. On to my next one. So it's just repetitive. This is what we're going to do for every single one of these letters. We're testing out how does our pencil work. So I'm going to let you work at your own pace. You can follow along with me, or you can just start going. And think about pressing hard. I like to go in little oval motions all the way up. And by the time I get to about halfway, 3/4 here, I want to be pressing really, really light to fill this in. Do a second round if you want to really see how dark that can go. Okay, so they look pretty similar at this point. 6B and 4B for me look really, really close. I'm going to move on to my next one, which is my 2B. Don't forget to start lightening up your pressure as you work your way up. You're barely touching the page at the top. Okay, pressing nice and hard at the bottom. Really want to see what that pencil can do. All right, on to my HB. On to the E for the 2H. So this is also teaching you a little bit about pencil control. If you haven't practiced your pencil control, maybe because you do a lot of texting or you spend more time on a computer typing because we've really come into that digital age, this is a skill to be able to manipulate a pencil. So if you feel like you need to develop that skill, this is why we're taking the time to practice now. Starting to get a little lighter there. And on to my last one, which is my 4H. You'll start to notice with your pencils, like especially that 4H, it's a, I guess, tighter pressed piece of graphite within the shaft of the pencil here. So that means that when you're pressing it down, it's going to feel a lot harder as opposed to the 6B that feels kind of more like you're pressing around with charcoal because it's a softer, less pressed piece of graphite inside of the shaft of the pencil. So other things that I'll kind of explain really quick as you finish this out would be that if you're trying to go for a very soft blended look, you might want to stick more with that 6B. For example, if you're doing hair on a human head, or you're trying to do some bulky fill in a value on something, versus your 4H really is kind of your touch-up pencil. So if I were working on a really detailed eyeball or a nose on a human face, I would want to be using this 4H because it can go super, super light, but it's like using a very thin point Sharpie as opposed to a thicker Sharpie for your 6B. So that's kind of maybe your analogy for the different medium for how your pencils work and when you would use them. So there it is. So when I look at this, I can definitely see a difference between my 6B, kind of what's happening in the light area. It's kind of thicker, chunkier, as opposed to it's very thin and kind of maybe harder to blend for that 4H because it is so thin and it is such a compressed piece of graphite. Okay, let's get on to our next section, but before we do, I'll maybe give you guys just another 15 seconds to wrap that one up. All right, let's talk about what a value scale is. So a value scale, again, we've already talked about, shows the change of light to dark. So this one, we just did a whole bunch of pencil value scales, but we're just gonna do one more here. I'm just gonna use my HB pencil. It's the one that we commonly use all of the time. So I'm gonna go through here from the bottom. I'm turning my paper sideways again. I'm pressing hard. And as I work my way up, I'm going to create a lighter pressure to make a value scale. So barely touching it at the top. Now, if it's really kind of a little bit uneven, it's not a bad idea. And some of the best shaders, if you really want that nice, smooth shading, do a second layer or a third layer. If you accidentally go outside of the lines, just take your eraser at the end and you can clean up the edges. Or you can use your pencil and the eraser on there to clean up your edges. Nice and smooth. So in order to earn this point, you need to get it nice and smooth. The next one, we are looking at ink. So for ink, we're going to use a marker. You should have picked up a marker now. I'm going to work with blue because I'm going to switch to different colors as we work into our value changes with colors. So this one, it is telling me that I need to do shading with lines. Okay? We would technically call these lines hatching. Okay, so our technical term is called hatching, and with this one I'm just going to create lines, meaning that when I want to create value with this, we know that a marker only has one value. So if I really want to make this look like it has value, I need to think of creatively, how can I show value with only one value? And how that works is making thicker lines that are closer together into thinner lines that are more spread apart, creates value with a one value marker or one value medium. So that's one way that you can do it. If I'm doing it with pencil, it can be very much the same concept. So I can put more lines down at the bottom and then start spreading them out as I work my way up and make them lighter. So I'm gonna go darker, press a little bit harder here on the bottom, start spreading them out and making them a little lighter as I work my way up. So that creates value using lines and a pencil. So these are, all of these ones that we're about to do are line techniques. I'm gonna zoom in here so you guys can see a little bit more. So the next one, we're gonna shade with cross hatching. Okay? Cross hatching means that we're gonna take hatching and we're just going to crisscross it over the top of itself. So if I turn this again, I'm going to start with some thicker lines. Okay? And as I work my way up, okay, I'm going to start spreading them out and making less of them. And now cross-hatching means that I can go any other direction that I want. I'm just gonna go kind of at an angle here. Okay? And I'm going to make them kind of close together. And then just like the other one, I'm going to start spacing them out. Okay? So that is cross-hatching, creating value. So back down here, this is all darker. This is the darker area. And it's getting lighter as we work our way up. Cross-hatching. Same idea with the pencil. So start with closer together lines and then crisscross them over. I could make them straight if I wanted to. Doesn't matter, as long as they are crisscrossing over each other. The next one says shading with stippling, and we've already learned a little bit about stippling before. So stippling is just the dots. So I can leave this one straight up and down for this, but the idea would be bigger dots closer together on the bottom with the ink, and as I work my way up, they're going to start getting farther apart. You may have to do a couple layers with this one to really get it to look nice. And switch to the pencil. Okay, so those again are our line techniques. We can use hatching, cross hatching, and stippling as just a few of the ways that we can create value. On to value changes with color, and these are going to be our blending techniques. So we're going to add tinting to a color, which means adding white, and we're going to add shading, which means adding black. So it says here, tinting with color to a little bit of color, add increasing amounts of white to change the value. So let's look at, on your desks, you should have an oil pastel kit. Okay, it looks like this. They come in a little tackle box, and they're all neatly organized. We're going to do our very best to make sure that we keep them that way, but you can very carefully open up the latch on the one side. Don't just tear it open. And we want to keep those latches in good condition. And I for sure need to make sure that I have a white, and then I have a black to work with. And from there, it doesn't really matter what color you want to use. I'm going to use red for this first example. So that you can see red, and I add white to it. If you want to take a guess, it's going to create pink. Okay? But when you work with oil pastels, there's a certain technique that you want to use so that you get a nice, even, smooth blend. So I'm going to start with the darker color in the bottom. And again, I'm going to shift to the side. Now, if you have a dirty oil pastel, let's just talk about the care here for a second. If it's dirty, you can take a paper towel and you could just wipe and pull that off. Some students prefer to have just an extra sheet of paper that they can just kind of wipe it off and scribble it off like that. So your sketchbook could be a good use for that. But that is how you would go about cleaning an oil pastel. Me personally, I would recommend the wiping instead of the scribbling because you waste a lot of extra oil pastel doing the scribbling part. So you can choose whatever option works for you, but you want to make sure that they're clean before you start using them. Otherwise, you get smudges. So here we go, right in here. Here's your blending technique. So we're going to start with that red, and we're pressing hard. And as we work our way up towards the middle, I'm going to lighten my pressure a little bit. Okay, so it starts to look a little bit more crayon-like. And I'm going to overlap one more time. So I'm going to press kind of hard back here, fill it in, and then start pressing a little crayon-like. Then you're going to take the white. Now, if I just started here in the red and I worked my way over, I'm never actually going to get to true white because my oil pastel is going to be dirty from the red. So you actually have to work backwards, meaning that I'm going to start over here with the white and I'm going to swirl. So I'm making little ovals into the red, and you'll see that it'll start picking it up. And just like I did with the red, I'm going to ease up on my pressure as I work my way that direction. And now we have a nice smooth blend. But before I go back, if I have to do a second row, I need to clean off my pencil. Or off, sorry, not my pencil, my oil pastel, right? So you guys can see kind of that extra that I'm losing. But there it is, nice and clean now. So I can do a second row if I need to. And kind of fill that in and blend it out. The other tricky part with oil pastels is you don't want to overblend too much because then it starts to exhaust, meaning that it gets so gunked up that then the oil pastels don't blend nicely together. So there's that one. Let's try it one more time. I'm going to choose green this time. So I'm going to use a green one, same concept. You can choose whatever color you want. Filling it in and get lighter as I work my way up. And taking my white. truthfully, you can do this technique with, for example, if I wanted to lighten this into like a lime green, I could take a yellow and instead of white, and I could start adding yellow to make it a little bit lighter as well. It's not technically a true tint, but you are making it lighter. So I have a tendency, like I want to wipe all these crummies away. I'd recommend you don't, because you're going to smear them everywhere, right? Instead, you can pick up your paper, kind of do a gentle tap, and or a little bit like blow onto your paper to get some of those guys off. Now, if you absolutely have to brush, make sure you use a very light touch so you don't smear it. All right, let's find out about shading. We talked about it. I said to a light, medium, or medium color, add black, or a dark color, a little at a time to change the value. So here we go. I'm going to start, actually, I like to start with the black for this one and work up to the lighter color. It's always nicer with oil pastel to start with the darker color and mix in the lighter one. There are some exceptions to that rule, so it's always good practice to maybe try on a piece of scratch paper to figure out what works good for you and if the color combination is going to work well. So for this one, I'm also going to use red again. I'm starting with the black, and black is a really heavy color, meaning that it's really bold. It's really kind of that concrete color. So if you put too much down, it's going to overpower your other color. And now I'm going to check to make sure my red is clean. And I'm going to start on this side and bring it to the middle. I'm going to kind of keep that hard pressure with the red, mainly just because I know that my black is a little bit overpowering. So there we go, it's starting to light up a little bit, and you can see that it's creating a shade. And cleaning off my oil pastel. I'm going to do one more round in there. Really blending it nicely. Makes kind of a nice maroon color. There it is. Okay, do it one more time. I'm gonna pick blue with this one, next one. I'm starting with that black. Actually, let's do an example where we're making it a darker color, right? So let's just say that my blue is going to be my darker value and my red is, actually let's go yellow. Let's go yellow, right? Because we know that yellow and blue makes green. So I should kind of get a green in there. So yellow is my lighter color, blue is my darker color. I realize this is a little bit different than a true shade, but it'll teach us a little bit of shading. So here we go. So starting with that darker color, make sure you check to make sure that your oil pastel is clean. Lighten up my pressure as I get to the middle. And swirling it in with the oil pastel. Aha, look at that. I got a beautiful green to show up. And just lighten up my pressure. Okay, so you really want it to create like a nice gradient. If you have like a quick stop, if you really want to develop your shading skills, it should be a nice smooth gradient is the word. So it goes from that blue to that green to the yellow. All right. So that is how we do shading with color. Now let's just talk about shading applied to objects. And this is where we're going to actually label these. So right down here, we actually have what's happening on this little bowl or pot here is we have lines that are going around the bowl or pot to create what's called contour lines or cross contour lines. It's trying to show the volume of that little pot. But then we also have the cross contours because it's also wrapping around to give us that extra idea of form. So I'm just going to label this as cross hyphen contour. That's an example of cross contour. This one, we're just using straight lines, which we learned up above, is called hatching. So we can see how that adds value using that technique. The one next door here, this is called cross hatching. So what's the big difference between cross contour and cross hatching? Right? Cross contour, you're actually trying to show the information of how it is a 3D form, versus like with this one, we have a little bit of those contour going on, okay, but would be more like cross hatching because they're a little bit straighter. Okay, so here we go. Cross hatching. And then for these last three examples, this is the stippling technique. So we have a little bit of that cross contour and a little bit of the hatching happening over here with the deer-like creature, but this is going to be your stippling so that you guys can see a quick example of what each one of these techniques, if it were applied to a form, how you could use them. Okay. Next section. So it says a light against dark, so black against white. All right, so I'm going to use my markers this time. So make sure you have your marker out. I'm going to use the black marker, okay, and I'm just going to fill that in. Here's what I want you to focus on with this. We are going to be working with marker later in the semester for an art project, so I want to make sure that you practice not just making it a nice smooth getting on the side of the marker, but I also want you to test out, what does it feel like getting up on the top? Now, if you're on the tippy point, you don't want to be smashing into the paper, otherwise you're going to have a sad marker within a couple of lines, right? So try to get on the side of it, but don't be afraid to take a second to stand it up and see how it feels up on the tippy point, because you'll need that. And so that's white plus black, and what we're doing here is we're creating contrast. So to show unlikeness or something different, opposite or dissimilar. Okay? Then we want to do a light against a dark color. So I'm going to, again, take my marker sets, and I'm going to do that same combination of blue and a yellow, because those are light against dark colors. So generally your cool colors are going to be your darker colors, and your warm colors are going to be your lighter values. That's not always the case. For example, red would be considered darker than yellow if you were mixing those two. And pulling it across. So that creates contrast. And you can do a pattern against no pattern. I'm going to use my pencil for this one so it stays a little bit neater. So this next one is a pattern against no pattern. Let's just say that I want to do maybe a checkerboard pattern. So I'm going to go across, break it into 4 lines. I'm going to maybe divide it into 2 lines up above, and then I'm just going to start up here, filling it in, every other. So what I'm showing here is that this creates contrast because there's a pattern versus no pattern. Same concept here with color. You know, if I were to take and do the whole thing yellow, maybe on one side of my yellow, I want to add a pattern. So I'm going to use orange to add my pattern this time. And I'm going to make it an easier checkerboard. So if I do something like that, and then every other, I've now created contrast between this side and this side. Okay. Other ways that you can create contrast, so that's stressing the differences. Okay. You can have a background that is detailed, busy, and active, and then the subject, which is the bird, is peaceful, it's inactive, it's a very simple shape. So it's essentially the idea of a detailed against an undetailed space. You guys also completed this when you guys did a Zentangle name tag. It was very much that same concept of your name tag, or your name was the positive space. It was where we left it blank, and then our negative space, in this case, was the outer background. Okay? So it's more detailed. It creates contrast though, right? So as we move forward, we just want to look for value and contrast, both natural and man-made, in your environment and in your future art projects. So now we're going to flip it to the back for page 2.